The clearest way into the universe is through a forest wilderness. The person who said this quote went by the name of John Muir, and is widely known as one of the United States' first leaders in the conservation movement of the late 19th century that helped to bring about many of the protected lands in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Muir was instrumental in the national recognition of areas such as Glacier Bay in Alaska, Mount Rainier in Washington, the Petrified Forest in Arizona, and the massive sequoia trees of the Sierra Nevada. But the place Muir was most passionate about, and dedicated his life to protecting, was a valley carved by glaciers, a series of granite monoliths that bend the landscape around them to their will. Today we talk about this place. Today, we discuss the story of Yosemite National Park. Yosemite is a huge park, which is why REC will be producing 2 videos about this amazing place. Part 1 will discuss the history and geology of Yosemite, and Part 2 will cover the many different attractions at one of America's oldest national parks. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Our story begins in an age of ice, when massive sheets of frozen material known as glaciers covered most of North America in a blanket of chilly slush. The last great ice age helped to shape many of the characteristic landscapes and animals that can be seen in today's society, but in some places, remnants of the ice age still remain. In Alaska, a land of snow and ice, many glacial features can be found, and in the park in Montana called Glacier, hints of the ice age can be seen as well. At Yosemite, there are only 2 active glaciers left in the park, Lyell and McClure. However, what the massive glaciers left behind from the ice age can still be seen in all its glory, in Yosemite Valley itself, and Hedgehedge, but we'll get to that later. The man who was largely responsible for proving that Yosemite was indeed carved out by glaciers, and who discovered the above-mentioned active glaciers in the Sierra Nevada mountains, was John Muir, who argued against another theory at the time presented by geologist Josiah Whitney that argued that Yosemite was formed by a cataclysmic event that deepened the floor of the valley and created the rocks there today. However, Muir's theory would ultimately prevail, which brings us to the first peoples that would lay eyes upon the many mountains and valleys of Yosemite after the glacial retreats at the end of the Ice Age 10,000 years ago, the Native Americans. It would be only 2,000 years after the Ice Age when the first groups of people started to inhabit the valley that came to be called Ahwahnee, meaning gaping, mouth-like place, a name that can easily be seen when viewing the vast expanse of granite and forested cliffs. The people were known as the Ahwahnee, and eventually became part of a larger group of peoples in the Sierra Nevada called the Miwok. For thousands of years, the Miwok remained mostly isolated, with occasional conflicts among neighboring tribes occurring, until the arrival of Europeans at the end of the 18th century. Perhaps unsurprisingly, conflict is actually what brought white men into Yosemite in the first place. The California Gold Rush of 1849 attracted thousands of settlers out west, and as more and more people crowded into certain areas, conflict arose between the new arrivals and those who had lived there for centuries. A group of Indians from a little-known tribe called the Yosemites, meaning killer or those who kill, attacked the camp of James Savage in 1850, which sparked a year-long war between Savage and the Indians, but also caused Savage, along with his militant Mariposa Battalion, to become the first Europeans to lay eyes on the Yosemite Valley. After the war against the Yosemites had concluded, several expeditions were sent into Yosemite Valley to explore the many features in and around the area. The first man who would visit Yosemite for recreational purposes would be James Hutchings, who, along with a couple of other people, visited the valley in 1855. A few years later, in 1864, the area would get national attention and be given to the state of California by President Abraham Lincoln for preservation from settlement. However, Hutchings had just set up a hotel in Yosemite Valley 2 months before the land was set aside, and therefore was forced to engage in a long series of legal battles until his hotel could get funded by the state. During these arguments, one man would arrive at Yosemite and meet Hutchings. This was John Muir, who would soon gain a name for himself in addition to Hutchings in the Yosemite area. Muir originally worked for Hutchings and built a sawmill at Yosemite, but tensions rose between the men, and Muir grew to be a famed advocate for Yosemite in his own right. In 1890, it was Muir who put out a call for Yosemite to become a national park, and on October 1st of that year, Yosemite became the United States' 3rd national park, after Yellowstone in 1872 and Sequoia established a week before Yosemite. However, Muir's final fight before he passed away was unfortunately one he lost. North of Yosemite Valley lay the Hedgehedge Valley, a majestic valley with the same grandeur as its sister valley further south, but a lot less visited. Through the valley flows the Tuolumne River, which in the early 20th century was seen as a potential major supply of water for the rapidly growing San Francisco Bay Area. Muir fought tooth and nail against the construction of a dam in the beautiful valley, but the need for supply of water to San Francisco outweighed Muir's efforts, and a year before Muir died, the proposal to build the dam was signed into law. While Muir was fighting for the survival of Hedgehedge, a group of U.S. Army soldiers, known as the Buffalo Soldiers, resided in the main portion of Yosemite, as the National Park Service had not been founded yet, and like many of the national parks at the time, the U.S. Army was put in charge of keeping the parks in order. This African-American military group withstood racial discrimination in the parks, in addition to their already strenuous tasks of keeping visitors safe from animals and other natural forces. But they stood strong against all odds, and became one of the earliest champions for African-American civil rights movements later in the 20th century. One final person who Yosemite would not be complete without is Ansel Adams. A photographer who constantly visited the park in the early 20th century, Adams was known for producing iconic pictures of Yosemite features like Half Dome, El Capitan, and the many waterfalls throughout the park. He is also known for being the person who is responsible for your generic desktop backgrounds. And here we are in the 21st century, an age where technology dominates the global landscape, including this video you're watching right now, and the world is constantly changing. But unchanging through all the modernity is Yosemite National Park, a place engulfed with flora, fauna, and a massive legacy of history and geology. Yosemite is a place full of natural beauty, but to learn about that, you'll have to watch part 2 to this video, where we discuss the attractions and wildlife you can find at this wonderful national park. Thanks for watching RIC Adventures, and until next time, happy travels!